Hey everybody and welcome to NWR TV. I'm John Reardon, and today we're going to talk about Fire Emblem Warriors. Now, like pretty much every North American news review outlet, we didn't get an early copy of Fire Emblem Warriors, unfortunately, which means we couldn't have a review ready for you right at launch. So, we're working on that right now, but in the meantime, I wanted to give you just my quick thoughts on the game so far, so that if you are looking to go out and maybe get the game this weekend, you're not going at it completely blind. So, here we go. Not even putting the hair in a ponytail. It's just free because I'm too busy making Fire Emblem videos to put my hair in a ponytail. That's where we're at right now. It's crazy here. So the basic premise of a Warriors game, if you've never played one before, is you take control of one or more characters. You're on a big battlefield. Most of the enemies around you are totally not a threat to you. You can kill them in a couple hits. What you're trying to do is take out certain powerful enemies, protect your allies, control fortresses or bases, whatever they're called in that particular game, and win. So it's a combination of hack and slash with some strategy, and as the series has gone on, that strategy element has become more and more prevalent, and obviously when using the Fire Emblem franchise, that element seems to be even more of a big deal, because that is, you know, kind of the whole thing about Fire Emblem, is strategy. And Permadeath, which is also an option in this game, which is terrifying to me, and I do not play in that mode. But it is not, if you do want your character to stay dead forever after they die, you can do that in this game, so that's good, that's fun, that's just stressful, but if that's the thing you like to do, then haha, this game has you covered. Like Hyrule Warriors, when that game came out, it implemented a lot of stuff from Zelda into the Dynasty Warriors kind of formula. So like Hyrule Warriors added like boss fights, special items like bombs, arrows, stuff like that. It added those features from Zelda into Dynasty Warriors formula to kind of make a unique experience. Fire Emblem does the same thing. It does carry over some of the stuff that we saw in Hyrule Warriors Legends, such as the ability to give commands to other powerful units on the field, switch between different units during battle and not just stick with one, but then also adds stuff key to Fire Emblem. One of the most interesting ones, I think, is the weapon triangle. So if you're familiar with Fire Emblem, you know the sort of rock, paper, scissors system of swords, spears, and axes. Each one is powerful against one and weak against another. So you want to keep that in mind when you're choosing what unit to use against what unit. Different ones will have an advantage on different units. So if you take the time to level up a character, you can kind of brute force your way through some of that stuff, but especially early on in the game or when fighting really powerful enemies, that stuff is crucial, and so you kind of need to keep that in mind. And the game does a pretty good job of indicating very easily whether you are at an advantage or disadvantage against a unit. So it's not something where you have to memorize that weapons triangle, which I can never keep straight. It is pretty clearly indicated, so it's not too bad to kind of look at the map and try to arrange your units so that you're going to wind up fighting these more powerful enemies with the correct unit. And that's awesome. That does kind of seem to replace the item system from Hyrule Warriors, wherein that, as you went through the game, you would find, like in the first level, you found bombs. You could use those to destroy rocks, to open up passages. In later levels, you would find bows and arrows, hook shots, and these things all did something in the game world. Many of them were used against bosses, like the big giant bosses, which from what I've seen so far don't really seem to be in Fire Emblem Warriors, which is honestly kind of disappointing to me. I think that was one of the coolest things that Hyrule Warriors added to the formula. I get that Fire Emblem doesn't really have as many giant dinosaurs wandering around for you to fight, so it makes sense that that stuff's not in there. But it is kind of a disappointing thing to lose from Hyrule Warriors going into Fire Emblem Warriors. Beyond the weapon triangle, there are also some other specific weaknesses and advantages that were carried over from Fire Emblem, so stuff like archers against Pegasus Knights. A archer is horribly detrimental to a Pegasus Knight, and can pretty much one-shot kill them, which is how I lost a Pegasus Knight. Made me very glad I was not playing on the Permadeath mode, because it's very easy for things to turn around because of these combat advantages and disadvantages. Everything could be going fine, and then one of your units comes up against the wrong enemy and just gets wiped out. And so it is very crucial to keep that stuff in mind, and it adds an interesting kind of twist to the tactical element of the gameplay, and that's awesome. Once again, that being said, for some of the lesser enemies, as you progress through the game, as you power up your characters more, some of that starts to matter less, but it is still relevant against the more powerful enemies. Another interesting element from Fire Emblem that they've carried over into Fire Emblem Warriors is the idea of pairing units. So essentially you can take two units, put them together, and it increases their attack power, As you fight, they'll build up multiple special attacks. Some are defensive things, so if you're about to take damage, your pair-up character may hop in and defend you from that attack. You'll build up special attacks where they can attack with you, which is really good for using against bosses. And the more you use units together, the more they help each other out, the more powerful those bonds will be, and the more powerful those pair-ups will be. So that's an interesting concept. You'll also find spots in the map where certain units may be able to get across while other units can't. So like a flying unit can cross a gap. Obviously an on-foot unit can't if it's like a big hole in the ground. So you can pair a ground unit with a flying unit and they can carry them over that gap. And so there's lots of stuff of, you know, if it's a level where you have a bunch of holes in the ground that you need to get around, and your Pegasus Knight has a way easier time doing that, you want to protect that Pegasus Knight because they're key to shuttling your other units around. You can do the level without them, but it's going to mean you have to, instead of, you know, cutting straight to where you want to be to save some other unit, you have to go all the way around the map, might not make it there in time. So it's kind of key to know what your unit's advantages and disadvantages are, pair them up with the right units, and take advantage of that stuff. On a technical level, if you have seen our performance versus quality video, essentially the game has two different display modes, a performance and quality mode. One targets a higher frame rate and one targets a higher resolution. The good news is the game runs pretty darn well either way, and better than Hyrule Warriors does either way. So it's definitely an improvement there, and overall, really happy with the performance of the game so far. There are frame rate drops. That does happen in a game where you have this many characters on screen, this much chaos, and kind of the randomness of it. It's bound to happen. Nothing so far has ever been as bad as the frame rate drops that were in Hyrule Warriors, so it doesn't really bother me. And that ability to switch between 60 frames per second or 30 frames per second and adjust resolutions kind of gives you that customization. So if lower frame rates really, really bother you, you can go with the lower resolution and higher frame rate to kind of help alleviate that. So it's cool that the game gives you those options to kind of customize the game to how you want it to play. As far as progression goes, it's pretty similar to Hyrule Warriors. You essentially are going level to level. At times, your party will split up and go on branching paths, at which point you can choose kind of to do either one, and then you'll reunite. So very, very similar to Hyrule Warriors in that regard. Also, much like Hyrule Warriors, the upgrade system of, I believe they're called badges, where you can add extra attacks to your repertoire, you can add additional healing items, you can do different kind of perks. You create those from the items that you get from finishing battles, and items that you find lying around in the field, or I shouldn't say items, but materials that you find. And so by combining those things together, you can make new badges, which let you do new things, power up your characters. Of course, your characters also level up as they go, which, to be honest, by default, is kind of annoying, because they bring up a classic Fire Emblem level up screen where you see all their stats adjust and all that, and they say some witty one-liner. That's really annoying when you're in the middle of a fight and it keeps pausing because random units that you're not even using, it's units, you know, on the other side of the map did something and they leveled up. Like, great, I appreciate it. But by default, it freezes the game to show you that. You can turn that off. I realized later on. And so if you go into the options menu, you can turn off that level up screen. And then you can still, like, all that stuff still happens, and you can still see that stuff when you want to see it. It just doesn't interrupt your game and stop you to tell you that they leveled up. And so that, by default, that's on. I don't like it, but you can turn it off if it annoys you too. There does also appear to be some class change upgrade stuff that you can do. I haven't really gotten far enough to get too deep into that yet. But once again, another thing from Fire Emblem that carried over is it does seem that you can kind of upgrade and change unit classes as you go through the game, which adds a lot more customization than is common in like a Warriors game. You can really kind of customize your party to play the game the way you want to play it. The other big mode that they have in this is called History Mode. This is essentially a replacement for the Adventure Mode that was in Hyrule Warriors. I'm gonna be honest, not a huge fan of the History Mode. The idea is cool. The idea is that they are recreating classic battles from Fire Emblem. And so you'll actually, when you load it up, you'll see what looks like essentially in like Fire Emblem Awakening echoes like the modern Fire Emblem game graphics. You'll see like this classic battle with all the characters down there and the units. Problem is that once you actually get into it, it's just random objective-based fights. The environment you're in and the kind of idea of the objective, and even the character you're playing as doesn't really seem to reflect what was going on the map. And so, really, it's just a fancy menu to get to these random little objective mini-games. I feel like it kind of missed out. It would have been way cooler to actually see these classic battles recreated in a Dynasty Warriors style. That's what I was hoping it would be, whereas this is, in my opinion, much less interesting, and that's a little bit disappointing. But the actual story mode is still good, so I think this will just kind of be a mode that I don't really get into, but if that's something that you're interested in, then, you know, more power to you. I think there seems to be plenty of content without that, so I'm not too worried about it, but it's not my thing. But yeah, those are my initial thoughts on Fire Emblem Warriors. Like I said, we will have a review coming out. Unfortunately, we just didn't get an early review copy, so we can't have a review ready at launch, but it will be coming, so keep an eye out for it. Check out the other Fire Emblem videos we have on the channel here. Like I said, there's one that compares the quality and performance modes, which is a really interesting feature, and definitely worth checking out if you are into kind of the technical side of things. So we have a video on that. Be sure to subscribe, give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and check out NintendoWorldReport.com for a lot more. If you want to support the site, this channel, what we do here, you can check us out on patreon.com/NWR. Once again, my name's John Reardon. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.